We continue now at the top of Daf Nun Daled Amud Aleph Mesechet Kesuvos. This is Kesuvos Daf 54a. The Gemara in the previous Amud asked, let's say you have a situation of a Bas Shniya, that is the daughter of a relationship which was a forbidden relationship, but it was an Isser Midrabanan, it was a relative that's only Asr on a Drabanan level. So in that situation, is the daughter going to be supported from the estate of the father? Let's say the father passes away. That's generally a stipulation in the Ksuba. The Gemara explains the question, Kevan de Les La Ksuba. So since the wife has no Ksuba in this case, so Les La Mizone, so there's going to be no Mizonos for the daughter. Odilmar maybe Ima Da'avda Isura Kansur Rabbanan. When it comes to the mother, she did an Isser over here. She committed an Isser by marrying because this was a Shniya, and so the Rabbanan give her a fine. Ihi de Lo Avda Isura, but the daughter who didn't do any Isser, Lo Kansur Rabbanan, so the Rabbanan did not give her a fine. Take with the Gemara leaves that as a question. Rashi over here says, Kevin the les la ksuba la'aim, les la mizone labas, since there's no ksuba for the mother, so there's no mizonos for the daughter. Da'atanai ksubahu, because again, it's all part of the condition of the ksuba, and again, the Gemara leaves that as a question. And the Gemara continues, Boy Rava. Rava asks the following question, Bas Arusa, Yesh la Mizonos, or Ein la Mizonos. Let's say it's the daughter of a situation of Erisin. Does she get Mizonos or does she not get Mizonos? Rashi over here says, Bas Arusa, Habal Arusaso v'yaldolo. Let's say you have a situation where the person has relations with his Arusa, and then they have a child, with a mace, and he dies, v'lo banim, and he has children, Yesh la Mizonos, minachasav, olo. So is there Mizonos from his estate, or is there no Mizonos? And so the Gemara says, explaining the question, Kevin, this ksuba isla, since there is a ksuba in this situation, so therefore there would be mizonos. Odilmar maybe came to lo takinu rabbanan ksuba, since the rabbanan did not institute a ksuba at shas nesuin until the time of the nisuin, lesla, so then there would not be mizonos teku, and the Gemara leaves that as a question. Rashi over here says, Kevin the isla ksuba kagon shekasav lamino erisin. You could have a situation where he writes her a ksuba during the erisin. Inami rabbanan tiku nami larusa, or you could say the rabbanan also institute for an arusa. Or maybe you'll say, since the Rabbanan did not institute that it gets written until the time of the Nisuin, so Tanai Ksuba Nami Mekame Hachi Lo Chayil, so there's no Tanai Ksuba as well. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Boy, Rav Papa asks, Bas Anusa. Let's say you have a situation of the daughter of an Anusa, a woman who was raped. Yesh la Mizonos, or Ein la Mizonos. Is there Mizonos or not? And the Gemara explains, I'll leave it to Rabbi Yossi B'Rabbi Yehuda. According to Rabbi Yossi B'Rabbi Yehuda, Lo Tiboylach, it's not a question. Diyamar Yesh la Ksuba Mana, because he says in that case there is a Ksuba. It is a Ksuba of a Mana, a Ksuba of 100, and therefore there certainly will be Mizonos. Ki Tiboylach, when is it a question to you? I'll leave it to the Rabbanan. It's only a question according to the Rabbanan. Diyamri Yotza Kesef Kinasa B'Chsubasa. They're the ones that say that the fine that you pay when you rape a woman, that fine that he pays, is instead of the Ksuba, so there is no Ksuba. So what would be the halacha in terms of Mizonos? Kevin the lesla Ksuba, lesla Mizone. Since there is no Ksuba, maybe there's no Mizonos. Odilmar, maybe Ksuba time amayit. By Ksuba, what is the reason? Kadesh Lote Kala Bein of Lotzi. In general, there's a Ksuba, so it should not be too easy for a husband to divorce his wife. V'halomatzi mapikla. But in this case, he's obligated to marry her in a situation of onus, in a situation of rape, and therefore we would say that there would be mizonos. The mizonos is not tied to the fact that there is no ksuba, and the Gemara says teku. We leave that as a question. And Rashi over here explains, Bas anusa onas es anara. The case over here is he rapes a na'ara, v'nosa acharechen, and then he marries her after. That's the halacha, k'dichsiv, like the pasuk says, v'lo siya li'isha, he has to marry her, v'yolda lo bas, and again, she gives birth to a daughter of a mace, and he dies. Yesh la mizonos meno achen, although does she get this mizonos from the brothers or not? Yesh la ksuba min achasav, so there is a ksuba, again, according to Rabbi Yossi B'Rabbi Yehuda, Mona Imeis. If he dies, there would be a ksuba of 100. Now, even though he already paid a fine in terms of the onus to her father, there still is a ksuba, according to Rabbi Yossi B'Rabbi Yehuda. Yatsa kesef kanasa b'chsubasa. But again, the Rabbanan say that there is no money for the ksuba because there was already a fine paid. Ve'ein la ksuba. There is no ksuba. What's the halacha? Mizonos habas shein tanai ksuba. When it comes to the mizonos habas, which is a condition of the ksuba, paki b'hachi, does that go away because of the fact there's no ksuba? O lo or not, mi'amrinan came in the lesla. Do we say as follows? Odil maksuba hainu taima. Maybe the reason there's no ksuba is specific to the ksuba. The lotikon la rabbanan. The rabbanan did not institute for her a ksuba. Mishum dechol ksubas isha. Mishum shalote kala beinav lotzia teknua. The only reason why they have ksubas isha is that it should not be too easy for a husband to divorce his wife. But here, by the case of onus, he's not even allowed to divorce her, like the pasuk says. So ksuba de mishum afukehu. So ksuba, which has to do with the fact that it has to do with divorce. It it's related to that issue. The lotikon delekol mechash. So there's no takon of money because there's no concern. So lesla. So therefore there's no ksuba. Again, there's no concern he's going to divorce her too easily. Avol shar tanai ksuba. But the other conditions of the ksuba, the lamisham shalotei kal. Those are not instituted, so it shouldn't be too easy to divorce her. Again, here he's not allowed to divorce her. So iskan. So maybe the tanai ksuba does apply. So isla. So she would get mizonos. And again, the Gemara leaves that as a question. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Ate Yosva Bevesi V'chulu. One of the stipulations of the Ksuba is if she becomes a widow, she stays in the house of the husband and she's supported from his estate, she gets mizonos. And the Gemara says, Tani Rav Yosef taught Bevesi V'lo Beviksi. This halacha that she stays, it's only in my house, but not in my hovel. In other words, if he doesn't have a house for her, he's not obligated to provide. Aval Mizone Isla, but mizonos she's still going to get regardless. Mar Baravashi, Amar Mar Baravashi says, Afilu Mizone Nami Lesla, if she's not staying in his house, so even the mizonos she doesn't get. But the Gemara says, Veles Hilchasa Kamar Baravashi, the halacha is not like Mar Baravashi. Rashi over here says, Bevesi v'lo beviksi, im yesh lo bayis kovanes hayarshin lases lo madur lefi chavoda. If he has a house, so then we force the yarshim to give her a proper house according to her respect. Ve'en yicholin lomar lo lechi levei savich. They can't say to her, go to your father's house, v'anu zanen osach shama will support you over there. Avalein lo bayis, but let's say he has no house. Ela biksa bi'alma, he just has a biksa. Tzarif tzar v'katan, it's again a small hovel. V'loshan biksa be'aksa yicholin lomar, then they could say, lechi meyatzleinu, go from us. Di'ate yosva bevesi kasa v'lo beviksi. It says you stay in my house, but not in my bixi, not in the hovel. Aval mizone isla, but still she gets mizonos. Bevei savia mina chasav. In other words, she goes to her father's house, but she still gets from his estate mizonos. Below amrina, we don't say kaven de lo karinan ba viata yasa vesi lo karinan ba mitzana mina chasai. We don't say, well, since we're not fulfilling the basi, therefore we're not going to fill the nechasai either. We don't say that. She still gets mizonos. Rav Yosef bevesi yaseira darish. The Rashi notes over here, Rav Yosef, when he says it's in my house but not in my hovel, he's darshaning the extra word bevesi. The tikon lemichta bevesi trei zimne. It says it twice. Ve'ate yosva bevesi kol yemei megar armulosayach bevesi. So therefore, Rav Yosef understands it specifically. It's my house again bevesi v'lo beviksi. And the Gemara continues. Amar Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel. Rav Nachman says that Shmuel says tavu ali nase. Let's say men came to this widow and they proposed to marry her v'nespaisa, and she agrees. So once she agrees to marry someone else, ein la mizonos, she no longer gets mizonos from the husband's estate. Halonis baisa. So the Gemara now infers, let's say she did not agree to marry them, so apparently yesh la mizonos, so she still gets mizonos from the estate of her deceased husband. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Anan says, L'didi mefarshali mine de Mar Shmuel. To me it was explained in the name of Mar Shmuel as follows, Amra machmas ploni bali. Let's say she says, the reason why I don't want to marry you is because I still have feelings for my husband who died, so then yesh la mizonos. Then she actually still is entitled to mizonos from her husband's estate. If the reason why she refused to marry someone else is because of her relationship that she had with her husband who died, then she's still entitled to mizonos from that husband who died from his estate. Machmas b'nei adam she'enan mehuganin la. But let's say she says, I just don't want to marry you because you're not fit for me. This is not a good fit in terms of marriage. So in that case, ein la mizonos, and then she doesn't get mizonos because she's indicating that she really is finished in terms of the relationship with her husband who died. She's ready to move on. Therefore, she doesn't get mizonos. The fact that she didn't move on is just because she hasn't found a husband who is suitable for her. And the Gemara continues. Amar Rav Chisda says, Zinsa, let's say she engages in zanus, let's say she has relations with other men, again talking about this widow, ein la mizonos. At that point she forfeits the right to mizonos from her deceased husband's estate. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Yosef says, Kichlo pirchasa, let's say she paints her eyes, she dyes her hair, ein la mizonos, again she gets no mizonos, she's not acting in a way that is befitting of the widow, and therefore she's not going to receive this mizonos. And the Gemara explains, Man Damar Zin, so the one who says that if she engages in sexual activity, so Kol Shekain Kichlo Firchasa, certainly if she paints her eyes and dyes her hair, certainly she won't get mizonos. Man Damar Kichlo Pirchasa, but the one who says she doesn't get mizonos by Kichlo and Pirchasa, by painting her eyes and dyeing her hair, Avol Zinsa Isla, but if she has nus, she is still going to get mizonos. My time, and what's the reason? Yetzer Unsa, we just say that it was her Yetzer Hara that forced her to do that, to be with another man. She is still entitled to mizonos. But the Gemara continues, V'les hilchasa k'chol hanishmaitza, but the halacha doesn't follow any of the halachas we said above. Ela kihoda amar Rav Yehuda amar Shmuel. Rather, the halacha follows what Rav Yehuda said, that Shmuel said, Hatovas ksubasa bebezdin. If she claims her ksuba in bezdin, she goes to bezdin and asks for the payment of the ksuba. At that point, she has totally severed her ties with her previous husband who died. Ein la mizonos. It's at that point in time that she no longer gets mizonos. But the Gemara says velo, but is that really true? Does she not get mezonos in that case? Vatanya. But we learned in a brisa, machar ksubasa. Let's say she sells her ksuba, umashkana ksubasa. Or let's say she takes her ksuba and she uses it as a collateral. Again, the situation here was that there was a piece of land that was designated for a ksuba. She's using it as a collateral. Or asta ksubasa apotiki. Or let's say she's taking her ksuba and she's using it as an apotiki. What that means is she's designating it for a bal chov. There's a creditor against her, and she's designating that apotiki la'acher for another individual, ein la mezonos. In these cases, there is no mezonos. And so the Gemara infers, hani in, only in these cases is there no mezonos. As Rashi says, hani in lafishein giboy ksuba, avol tvia lo. These are already considered like a collection of the ksuba. Then she loses the mezonos, but simply claiming the ksuba in bezin is not enough. Avol tovas lo, but if she claims it in bezin, that's not enough to lose the mezonos. And so the Gemara says it means as follows. Now, hani, when it comes to these things in terms of, let's say, selling the ksuba or making it a mashkun or an apotiki, so bein bebezin, bein shalo bebezin, it doesn't matter if she does that in bezin or not, she loses the mezonos. But tovas, if she claims the ksuba, so bebezdin in, shalo bebezin lo, only if she claims it in bezin does she lose the mezonos. Otherwise, if she claims the ksuba outside of bezin, she does not yet lose the mezonos. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, v'kachayu anshe Yerushalayim v'chulu. This is what the anshe Yerushalayim used to write into the ksuba. The anshe Yerushalayim and the anshe Galil, they would write in that the widow is supported from her deceased husband's estate while she's a widow. And the anshe Yehuda, they would write into the ksuba that it is until the Yorshim decide to give her the ksuba payment. And the Gemara says, Itmar, we have the following machlokas amoroim. Rav Amar halacha ka anshe Yehuda. Rav says that the halacha is like the anshe Yehuda again until she actually receives the ksuba payment from the Yorshim. Ushmuel Amar halacha ka anshe Galil. And Shmuel says the halacha is like the anshe Galil, that while she's a widow, she receives she receives the mezonos. And the Gemara says, Bavel v'chol parvadoha nohu karav. Bavel and all the surrounding towns, they followed the opinion of Rav, meaning they followed the position of the anshe Yehuda. Nahardoy v'chol parvadoha nohu kishmuel. And Nahardoy and all its surrounding towns, they followed the opinion of Shmuel, meaning they followed anshe Yerushalayim and anshe Galil. And the Gemara says, Hahibas Mechuza, Dahavas Nesiva Nahardoi. There was a daughter from Mechuza, meaning a woman from Mechuza, and she married someone from Nahardoi. So also Lakamei Rav Nachman, they came before Rav Nachman in terms of how they should decide in terms of the mezonos. Shama Lakala de Bas Mechuza, he heard from her voice, from her accent, that she was from Mechuza. And so therefore he said, Amar Lahu, therefore he said to them, Bavel v'chol parfada. If you're talking about Bavel and all the surrounding towns, no Karav, we follow Rav in that situation, meaning to say we follow the anshe Yehuda. So Amrulei, so they said to him, V'halin Nahardoi Nesiva, but 1 second, she married someone from Nahardoi. So Amar Lahu, so he said to them, Mihachi, if so, Nahardoi v'chol parvavda, he said Nahardoi and all of the surrounding towns, no, Kishmuel, they follow Shmuel, and therefore we should follow Shmuel. And the Gemara clarifies, Ve'ad heicha Nahardoi, until where is Nahardoi? Where is the line that says this is the boundary of Nahardoi? And the Gemara answers, Ad heicha de sagi kav de Nahardoi. It's until the areas where they still use the kav, they measure with the kav of Nahardoi, then it's considered like you're still in Nahardoi. And the Gemara continues, Itzmar, we have the following machlokas amoroim, almona, when it comes to a widow. Rav Omar Shomin Mashal. Rav says we have to evaluate the clothing that she has. That clothing that she takes with her, really it belonged to the husband that she's taking it with her, so she has to deduct that from the ksuba payment that she will receive. Ushmuel Amar, and Shmuel says, Ein Shomin Mashal, we don't evaluate that which is upon her. Her clothing are considered hers, and they do not count as a payment towards her ksuba. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Chia Baravin, Rav Chia Baravin says, V'chilufa biloket. It's the exact opposite when it comes to a paid worker. Rashi over here says, Belokit sacher shagar bebeis balabayis. We're talking here about a hired worker who lives in the house of the balabayis. V'lokachlo balabayis begadim. And the balabayis buys him clothing. So kashayotze mimenu sham osam begadim b'scharu l'shmuel. So when that balabayis leaves, he has to evaluate the value of those clothing, and that's going to count as a payment, according to Shmuel. V'Rav Amar ein shamin, and Rav in this case says, no, it doesn't count towards his payment. So Rav and Shmuel say the exact opposite. That's what it means over here. They say the exact opposite when it comes to a locket, when it comes to a hired worker. Rav Kahana masni, but Rav Kahana, he taught as follows, V'chein b'locket. It's the exact same machlokas when it comes to a hired worker. In other words, according to Rav, just like we evaluate the clothing for the widow, so too we evaluate the clothing for the hired worker, and we deduct that from their payments. And the Gemara continues, Umanach basimonah. Rav Kahana used to put a simon as follows, Yasma v'armalasa. When it comes to the orphan here is a reference to the hired worker. V'armalasa, and the widow, that's our case, shalach upok. You have to disrobe, take off your clothing, and then you go, meaning according to Rav, again, shaman, we have to evaluate the clothing, and that counts toward their payment. And the Gemara continues, Amar of Nachman says, Afal gav de Tnan b'masnisin kavasi de Shmuel, even though there's a Mishnah that supports Shmuel, or that seems to support Shmuel, Hilchasa kavasi de Rav. Still, the halacha is going to be like Rav. Again, Shmuel is the one that says, Ein Shaman, the clothing do not count towards the payment. And this Mishnah seems to say, like Shmuel, de Tnan, as we learned in the following Mishnah. Echad hamakdish nechasav, yechad hamarach esatzma, whether a person sanctifies his property to the Beis HaMikdash, or whether a person donates his fixed value to the Beis HaMikdash. Ein lo b'chsos ishto v'lo b'chsos bonav. The treasure of the Beis HaMikdash is not allowed to take the clothing of the person's wife or the clothing of his children. V'lo b'tzeva shetzava l'shma, not things that were dyed for them, again for the wife and the kids. V'lo b'sandalim chadashim shalakach l'shman, or not new shoes, new sandals that were bought for them. In other words, the clothing of his wife and the clothing of the children, that belongs to the wife and the children. It doesn't really belong to the husband, and therefore this seems to go like Shmuel. Shmuel says ein shamin masha'aleh. We don't evaluate the clothing that she's wearing. That's considered her clothing. It's not considered a payment of the ksuba. And so the Gemara says, Amar le Rav Rav Nachman. So Rav said to Rav Nachman, if there's a Mishnah that supports Shmuel, so amai hilchasa kavasi de Rav. Why does the halacha follow Rav? It's true. This Mishnah does seem to support Shmuel, that we say the clothing really does belong to her. It's not considered a payment from the husband as part of her ksuba payment. So Amar le, so he said to him, L'chora k'Shmuel rihita. It's true that when you look at it on the surface, it seems like this Mishnah is like Shmuel. But Kima'ain is ba, but when you examine the Mishnah, Hilchasa kavase de Rav, it does turn out that the halach is like Rav. We can explain the Mishnah different. My time, and what's the reason? Ki akni lo adaita lamekam kamei. Because when he bought her the clothing, which the Mishnah, when you're donating, when you're giving hektish to the Beis HaMikdash, so over there, it's a situation where he's buying the clothing on what condition? On the understanding that she's married to him, that she stands before him in these clothing. So yes, in that situation, the clothing belonged to her. But on the condition, on the understanding that she would just be divorced, or she would be widowed and take these clothing with her, lo akni lo, he didn't purchase it for that purpose, meaning he didn't give her the clothing in the sense that it's hers, that she should just take it with her. Let's say she leaves the marriage, and therefore when she leaves the marriage, it is considered a payment from him to her, and it has to be deducted from the payment of the ksuba. That's why the halacha follows Rav, shamin masha aleha. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Kalsa debei Bar Elyashiv, the daughter-in-law of the house of Bar Elyashiv, have a kotava ksubasa miyasmin. She was claiming her ksuba from the Yisomim, from the orphans. Have a kamamti lehu lebeidina. So they were going to the Bezdin Amri, and they said, Zilalon milsa de tizli hachi. It's disgraceful for us that you go in these clothing that you're wearing. You should wear nicer clothing. So Azla levishtinu v'chsetinu lekule mana. So then she went and she put on her wardrobe. She put on all of her nice clothing. So Asa lekame de Ravina. They came before Ravina. Amar Lahu, he said to them, Hilchasa kavase de Rav. The halach is like Rav, the Amar who says, Almana shamin mashaleh, that when it comes to a widow, we evaluate that which she is wearing. So now we see you're wearing all of these nice clothing. We're going to take that into account and deduct that from your ksuba payment. And the Gemara continues, Ahuda Amar Lahu, there was a person who said to them, meaning to say, he said to those, the Yarshim, those who would inherit him, he said, Nedunya lebras, he said, I want you to give, as part of what I'm leaving over, part of it should be used for a dowry for my daughter. So then, Zol Nedunya, so then what happened was, the Nedunya actually depreciated in value. So the question is, who gets to keep the profit? Does the daughter still get more what was originally promised? Or no, everything depreciated, and therefore that profit goes to the Yisomim, it goes to the brothers. So Amar Ravidi Baravin, Ravidi Baravin said, Purna liyasme, the profit goes to the Yisomim, it goes to her brothers. Rashi over here says, we're talking about a person who's on his deathbed and he's giving instructions for his will. Nedunya lebras, he says he wants to give a dowry to his daughter. Ketsuvim hayu tachshite habanos kach v'kach levushim. It used to be a certain kinds of ornaments and certain kinds of jewelry, specific things they would wear, and the cost of those items went down. So Purna liyasme, so he said that the profit goes to the Yisomim, harevach liyisomim, the profit goes to the Yisomim. V'lo amrina neisiv lo demei hanedunya kiyom hatzava. We don't say that they have to give to her the value of the nedunya according to the day that the instruction was given. No, they just give the standard amount of ornaments and jewelry, whatever it is, and they can buy that for cheaper and keep the profit. And the Gemara continues, there was another individual who gave the following instructions, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Nun Dalid Amud Beis.